Good evening, friends. Imagine waking up one morning to find yourself lying on a creaky hard wooden bed, covered with a rough wool blanket. You're not participating in some retro-themed immersive experience. You've become an apprentice, a young tailor making clothes in a medieval court. Today, let's talk about what it was actually like to make clothes for kings, queens, princes, and princesses in medieval Europe. Now, dim the lights, and accompanied by the sound of bells, let us enter tonight's story together. It's not yet dawn 4 in the morning, outside the window. It's pitch black. Only a faint flicker of firelight atop the distant castle keeps sways in the cold wind. What wakes you is not an alarm clock but a diligent rooster in some corner of the town, a true model worker. Its first crow pierces the silence like a sharp pair of scissors, precisely cutting open your dreams. You, a boy of about 14 or 15, sleep in a small attic above the court tailor's workshop. Calling it a room would be generous. It's more of a storage space piled with miscellaneous items. Your bed is a heap of dry straw in the corner, covered with a piece of deerskin worn smooth from use. Cold is the sole theme of mornings in this era. A damp chill creeps in through the gaps in the wooden plank walls, like witchcraft, like icy needles piercing your bones. You shiver and pull that scratchy wool blanket tighter around yourself. But it's no use. The cold is all-pervasive. You're not the only apprentice here. 2 other boys sleep beside you, one named Thomas, one named Edmund. They sleep like 2 little pigs, letting out soft, contented snores. Your master, an old tailor named Alphonse, sleeps downstairs in the only room with a fireplace. That's a luxury apprentices wouldn't dare dream of. You sit up and fumble into your clothes, a coarse hemp tunic and trousers of the same material. On your feet go a pair of badly worn soft leather shoes. The clothes are stiff and wrinkled, carrying a permanent smell of sweat and fabric. In the darkness you accomplish all this almost entirely from memory. Fire, candles too expensive, apprentices have no right to lighting before dawn. The only perk might be that small piece of semi-transparent membrane on the window, which lets in just enough faint starlight for you to barely distinguish the bed from the wall. You tiptoe down the creaking wooden staircase, trying not to wake anyone, though you know this is largely futile. Master Alphonse's ears are sharper than a hawk's. Any sound that doesn't belong at this hour will have him leaping out of bed to give your shins an affectionate greeting with his wooden ruler marked with measurement scales. Today is your 3rd year as an apprentice. Your work begins with starting the fire. In the workshop's large workroom, there is an enormous fireplace that serves both as a source of warmth and as a heat source for pressing clothes. You skillfully use flint and steel to light the kindling, carefully stacking the firewood into a small mountain. The flames crackle, and their orange glow gradually illuminates the entire room. On the walls hang various scissors, needles, and thread, wooden rulers, and dress forms. Their shadows leap in the firelight like a group of silent ghosts. Next, you must fetch water, carrying 2 heavy wooden buckets through the silent courtyard. You arrive at the castle's central well-bone, chillingly cold. The sound of the pulley turning is especially loud in the early morning. The well water is heavy, making your small frame sway unsteadily. You must be extremely careful not to spill a single drop. This water will be used for washing fabric, mixing dyes, and the master's morning ablutions. By the time you've filled the water vat, the horizon has begun to show a pale fish-belly white. Master Alphonse has also gotten up. He wears a heavy dressing gown, his hair disheveled, his face bearing a look of someone not yet awake. He doesn't so much as glance at you, walking straight to the fireplace to warm himself, muttering complaints about the weather and the king's new orders. You know perfectly well that it's best not to speak to him before he's had his first cup of hot mulled wine. Your next task is to prepare the tools, polishing dozens of scissors of different sizes until they gleam, checking over 100 sewing needles for rust or bending, and winding the tangled threads of various colors neatly onto spools. This is an extremely tedious but crucially important job. Tools are a tailor's lifeblood. A good pair of large shears could be passed down as a family heirloom for generations. Some tailors would even write into their wills something like leaving their second best pair of scissors to their most beloved apprentice. As for the best pair, that, of course, goes to their son. Just as you're buried in sorting needles and thread, you hear a slight commotion. It's the Queen's chief lady-in-waiting, a woman named Isabella, who always rises earlier than anyone else in the court. She appears at the workshop door, her expression grave, holding a neatly folded silk robe. You immediately lower your head, not daring to look directly at her. In the court, an apprentice is like a piece of breathing furniture. It's best not to attract anyone's attention. Lady Isabella walks directly to your master and whispers something in a voice only the two of them can hear. "Your master Alphonse." That same old man who moments ago was still bleary-eyed, his expression instantly turns solemn. He takes the robe and examines it carefully, his brows knotting together. From the corner of your eye you catch a glimpse. It is an extraordinarily magnificent purple robe, embroidered with intricate heraldic designs in gold thread. Purple, known at the time as the color of emperors, was made from a rare Mediterranean sea snail, its value far exceeding that of gold. The number of people in the entire kingdom who could wear this color could be counted on one hand. You don't know what has happened, but you know that today will definitely not be a peaceful day. The life of a court tailor is like dancing on a taut silk thread. You must display the most elegant dance moves on one side, while being extremely careful on the other, lest you fall into an abyss, and you are merely an apprentice who has just begun learning how to stand on that thread. Your adventure has only just begun. Master Alphonse sends off the grave-faced Lady Isabella. He doesn't immediately begin working, but instead carefully places the purple robe in a velvet-lined wooden box and locks it. He turns and looks at you and the other two apprentices, who have just come downstairs still rubbing their eyes. He clears his throat and says in his customary, emotionless tone, "Thomas, go heat up the irons. Edmund, sort out the fabric scraps left over from yesterday. You," he points at you, "come with me to the royal storehouse." Your heart skips a beat. The royal storehouse, that's the holy ground of the court tailor's workshop, and also forbidden territory. Usually only master-level tailors have the right to enter. Apprentices at most wait outside to carry things. It seems today's matter is truly significant. You hurry to follow behind Master Alphonse, passing through several corridors and courtyards. The castle is still mostly empty. In the early morning, only patrolling guards and a few busy junior servants. The air is filled with the smell of damp stone and burning firewood. The royal storehouse is located in the basement of the castle's main building, guarded by two fully armed soldiers. Saying Alphonse, the guards merely nod and step aside. The master lights a torch and hands it to you, then pulls out a large, heavy ring of brass keys and begins fumbling at a thick oak door. With a click, the massive lock opens, and a peculiar blend of aromas rushes out: wool, linen, silk, leather, and the camphor wood and lavender used for moth prevention, all mingled together. For a tailor, this scent is even more enticing than the aroma of a bakery. Holding the torch, you follow the master inside, and you're stunned by what you see. This is no storehouse, it's a treasure cave of fabric. On row after row of tall wooden shelves, heavy bolts of cloth are neatly stacked, in colors ranging from the deepest indigo blue to the most dazzling scarlet. The torchlight falls on the silks and brocades, reflecting a flowing, dreamlike sheen. Fine dust particles float in the air, glittering like gold powder in the beam of the torch. Master Alphonse is clearly uninterested in your astonishment. He walks straight to the deepest part of the storehouse. You follow closely, your eyes greedily sweeping over fabrics you've only seen in books. Over there, fine spun wool from Flanders, soft as clouds. Over here, Genoese velvet from Italy, its deep black seeming to absorb all light. And those over there, gleaming with a metallic sheen, brocades woven with gold and silver thread, made specifically for the robes the king and queen wear at grand ceremonies. The master stops before a huge wooden chest secured with 3 locks. He opens it again with his keys. You lean in curiously. The chest is lined with soft white linen, and inside lie several bolts of fabric, whose luster and texture are entirely different from everything you've just seen. "This is Byzantine silk," the master says without turning around, a hint of reverence in his voice. "Every king in Europe is mad for it. Only 1 ship a year can bring it from Constantinople. The price and pay by a small roll like this is enough to buy a village outside the city walls, along with everyone in it." You gasp, buy an entire village just to make a few garments? And this, the master picks up another bolt of fabric. It is thin as a cicada's wing, displaying a peculiar rainbow-like iridescence. This comes from even farther away. Some say Persia. Some say an even more mysterious land to the east. We call it cloud brocade. Look. It's so light it's almost weightless. You cautiously extend your hand. The master silently permits it. Your fingertips lightly touch the fabric, and a cool, silky sensation flows through you, as if what you're touching is not cloth, but a piece of solidified evening sky. You suddenly understand why those noble women and lords are willing to spend fortunes on a single garment. This isn't merely fabric, it is a symbol of power, status, and wealth. Clothing is a language, silently declaring the wearer's identity. Commoners were forbidden from wearing expensive furs or bright colors. This was stipulated by law, known as sumptuary laws. A peasant caught wearing silk could be arrested. So what you're touching right now is a dream that ordinary people could never hope to reach in their entire lives. The master's target this time is a deep crimson velvet. He meticulously inspects every detail of the fabric, ensuring there are no flaws whatsoever. Then he takes out his ever-present wooden ruler, measures a precise length, and cuts it with a small silver pair of scissors. The entire process is full of ritual, as though he's not cutting fabric but performing a sacred surgical procedure. "Remember," he says, handing that bolt of velvet to you to hold in your arms, "treat these fabrics with more care than you would treat your own skin. The slightest stain, the tiniest snag in the threads could cost us both our livelihoods or even our heads." You nod vigorously, clutching the precious velvet tightly to your chest. Its weight is considerable, not just physically, but psychologically. Just as you're preparing to leave, your sharp eyes notice a forgotten little wooden crate in a corner, covered in dust. Curiously, you ask the master, "What's that?" Alphonse glances at it and curls his lip dismissively. "Oh, those. That's cotton. In your era, cotton is the most ordinary material." But here the master's tone is full of contempt. "It's something from Egypt and the Mediterranean, soft and limp. Not at all crisp, you can't make proper pleats with it. And it gets dirty easily. Washing it is a hassle. Only the lowest servants or some oddly minded scholars would wear such a thing." In medieval Europe, ruled by wool and linen, cotton was regarded by the mainstream fashion world as a cheap, low-class material due to its softness and resistance to shaping, far from the popularity it would enjoy in later centuries. Cradling this bolt of velvet worth an entire small village, you follow the master out of this storehouse full of treasures and secrets. Sunlight has already flooded the castle courtyard. The new day has officially begun. You feel as though what you're carrying is not a roll of fabric, but ticking time bomb. You know that the real show is about to begin by the time you return to the workshop carrying the deep crimson velvet. The atmosphere in the workroom has already grown tense. The other 2 apprentices, Thomas and Edmund, are scrambling to prepare various tools. Even Edmund, who usually loves to slack off, is behaving completely out of character, fine beads of sweat appearing on his forehead. Master Alphonse paces back and forth in front of the worktable like an agitated lion, muttering incessantly, "Not enough time." There's definitely not enough time. You carefully place the velvet on the largest worktable A table, made from a single slab of oak. Its surface covered by countless scratches and scorch marks from pressing irons, polished as smooth as a mirror. The master immediately pounces on it, unfurling the fabric. The gorgeous deep crimson flows in the morning light like a pool of congealed blood, beautiful yet startling. Soon you learn the purpose of this fabric. An important court banquet is to be held tonight to celebrate the visit of a prince from a neighboring kingdom. And the queen's niece, a young countess named Katerina, the gown she had originally planned to wear to the banquet suffered a terrible accident last night. Her mischievous pet monkey knocked an ink bottle over onto the skirt. You can hardly believe your ears. A monkey ruined what was probably a priceless gown. The medieval nobility's taste in pets was sometimes truly peculiar, from monkeys and cheetahs to bears, all sorts of exotic animals, practically a mobile zoo. These pets were not only companions but tools for flaunting wealth and status. Of course, they also frequently caused all manner of trouble. Now your task is to make an entirely new gown for Countess Katerina before sunset today. Time is pressing, the task daunting, it's nearly impossible. Stop standing there like a fool, the master shouts at you. Go get the design drawings. You immediately run to the cabinet by the wall, and from a pile of rolled parchments, find the one bearing the Countess's family crest. On the design sheet, drawn in ink and simple pigments, is the style of the gown. It's a very fashionable style of the time called a yé fitted at the bodice, with a wide skirt, and sleeves long enough to trail on the ground, with luxurious tassels hanging from the cuffs. This design was intended to show off the wearer's abundance of fabric, because in that era, fabric was hard currency. The master lays the design over the fabric and begins marking lines with white chalk. His hand is steady and precise. Decades of experience have given him an intimate knowledge of human anatomy and garment cutting. You and the other apprentices are responsible for passing tools, keeping the fabric straight, and performing the most basic assistive tasks. Scissors. At the master's command, you immediately hand over the largest, sharpest pair of Tailor's shears. With a few crisp snips, the expensive velvet is divided into several pieces. Your heart clenches with each cut. Those few snips just cost a peasant family several years' worth of income. Cutting is the most critical step in the entire garment-making process and the core technique that only the master can perform. In the Middle Ages, there were no standardized sizes. Every garment was custom-made for a specific person. An excellent tailor had to be a half-decent mathematician and geometrician, able to precisely calculate how to cut the most well-fitting pieces from the least amount of fabric. Did medieval tailors already possess techniques similar to modern draping? Scholars debate this to this day. Some believe they relied entirely on flat pattern cutting and experience, while others have discovered, in excavated garments, some very complex seam lines and panel joining structures that suggest more sophisticated cutting techniques may have existed at the time. Just as the workshop is in full bustle, a commotion is heard outside the door, a shrill woman's voice crying out loudly, accompanied by several men's low, placating voices. The master frowns and signals Edmund to go check. Before long, Edmund comes scrambling back, his face white as a sheet. Master, it's the Baroness de Beaumont. She says her farthingale was made wrong, and now she looks like a walking bell. Before he can finish, a stout woman in a bright yellow dress storms in furiously, 2 sweating servants in tow. The Baroness's skirt does indeed resemble a bell. The farthingale underneath, made of whalebone or willow, is propped so wide that she can barely walk. This type of underskirt originated in Spain and later swept across all of Europe. It was an essential tool for noblewomen to create the ideal hourglass figure, but clearly, this one had gone a bit overboard. Alphonse, the Baroness screeches in a voice that could penetrate walls. Look at what you've done. My husband says I look like one of the cows from his hometown. How am I supposed to show my face at tonight's banquet? The master's face instantly darkens. He sets down his work, steps forward, and examines the skirt with an extremely professional eye. You hide behind the worktable, not daring to breathe. You know this is a classic fashion disaster scene. In the court, clothing is not merely about covering the body or looking good, it's a weapon, a social tool. An ill-timed or poorly made garment is enough to make a noble the laughingstock of the entire court, and can even affect their political prospects. Master Alphonse circles the Baroness twice, then says unhurriedly, "Madam, please calm yourself. The problem isn't the farthingale. It's that you're, has become somewhat more ample since our last fitting. The phrasing is very diplomatic, but the meaning is clear. You've gained weight. My work isn't wrong." Baroness's face instantly turns the color of liver. She wants to argue back but can't find grounds to do so. Because there are no scales in the Middle Ages, the tailor's measurements are the only evidence. She can only stomp her feet in exasperation, the farthingale swaying so violently it nearly knocks over a nearby dress form. This is the daily life of a court tailor. You don't just need to know how to make clothes, you must also know how to read people's faces, how to speak tactfully, and when necessary, how to deftly deflect blame back onto the customer. It's a comprehensive art combining craftsmanship, psychology, and diplomacy. In the end, the master promises to slightly adjust the farthingale's connectors before the banquet so that the Baroness can at least fit through the banquet hall doors. Having dealt with this difficult noblewoman, the master's expression grows even grimmer. He glances at the water clock in the corner, an ancient clepsydra where the water has already drained to nearly half. He sighs and says to you all, "Don't get distracted. Keep working. If we can't deliver today, we might as well wait to be thrown into the moat to feed the fish." You shudder, quickly lower your head, pick up needle and thread, and begin sewing together the cut velvet pieces. You know the master might not be joking. In this era, a tailor's fate often hangs by a single thread. The air in the workshop seems to solidify. All that remains is the snipping of scissors, the faint hiss of needles passing through fabric, and the master's occasional brief commands. The three of you work like a precision machine, spinning at full speed around that deep crimson velvet gown. You're in charge of sewing the simplest part, the side seams of the skirt. Your fingers are already quite nimble, but facing such precious fabric, your heart still hangs in suspense. Every stitch must be even, secure, and hidden beneath the velvet's dense nap, so that no trace is visible from the outside. This technique is called a concealed seam, a fundamental skill every tailor's apprentice must master. Time ticks away second by second. The water in the clepsydra has passed the halfway mark. Just as you're buried in work, feeling your neck about to stiffen, the workshop door is gently pushed open again. This time, the person who enters leaves you astonished. It's Lady Isabella, the Queen's chief, lady-in-waiting. But she hasn't come alone. Behind her follows a figure wrapped tightly in a headscarf and cloak. Despite keeping her head lowered, from her gait and the faint scent of iris perfume, the kind only the most noble women would use, you guess an almost unbelievable identity. It is the Queen herself. Master Alphonse is clearly also stunned by this unexpected visit. He immediately sets down his work and, like you, bows deeply in a grand salute. The other two apprentices are so frightened they nearly drop everything in their hands. "Everyone out," Lady Isabella says in an unquestionable tone. You, Thomas and Edmund, immediately flee the workshop like pardoned prisoners, carefully pulling the door shut behind you. Standing in the corridor outside, you exchange glances, not daring to speak. The Queen coming personally to the tailor's workshop, this is utterly unprecedented. Court etiquette is strict. Someone of the Queen's exalted status would normally have the tailor bring fabrics and samples to her. There is absolutely no precedent for her coming down herself. The door is thick, but you can still faintly hear whispered voices from inside. You press your ear against the cold wooden door, straining to make out the words. "The situation is urgent, Alphonse." That's Lady Isabella's voice. This matter must absolutely not reach the king's ears. But your majesty wail? That's the master's voice, full of difficulty. This is nearly impossible. The time is far too short, and this kind of alteration, I don't care what methods you use. A gentle yet authoritative female voice speaks up, undoubtedly the queen. At tonight's banquet, it must be perfect. This concerns the kingdom's honor and the future of all of us. Your heart beats even faster. Kingdom's honor? The future of everyone? What on earth is going on? How could a garment be connected to something so momentous? After a while, the door opens. The Queen and Lady Isabella walk out. Their expressions are even more severe than when they arrived. As the Queen passes you, you can even smell the scent clinging to her, a mixture of perfume and anxiety. You keep your head lowered until their footsteps fade at the end of the corridor. You and the master return to the workshop, on the work table. In addition to the red gown being rush-made, there is now something else, the purple robe you saw this morning, the one the master had locked in the box. The master's face is pale, beads of sweat covering his forehead. He says nothing. He simply picks up the purple robe silently and unfurls it. Now you see it in full. It is a men's court robe, stately and magnificent in style. On the chest, a royal lion crest is embroidered in gold thread. Without question, this is the king's garment, and on the side of the waist, there is a clear tear, about a hand's length. The tear is very strange. It doesn't look like an accidental rip. The edges are clean, more as if cut neatly by some sharp instrument. Your mind races. The king's robe is torn. The queen wants to hide it from the king and have it secretly repaired. There must be an enormous secret behind this. Could it be an assassination attempt? Someone tried to attack the king before the banquet but failed, leaving only a gash in his clothing? Or does the tear conceal an even more complex court conspiracy? You dare not ask, dare not think too much. You know that in the court, the less you know, the longer you live. The master has you bring the finest needle and the silk thread closest in shade to purple. He will personally mend this tear. This work is far more difficult than making a new garment. He must use a special reweaving technique to reconnect the broken warp and weft threads one by one, making the repair completely invisible. This requires extreme patience and sharp eyesight. The slightest slip would leave an irreparable mark. Go, the master says to you, his voice somewhat hoarse, and bring me the book of colors. You pause for a moment. The book of colors is the master's treasure. A hand-copied compendium recording the formulas for various dyes and the symbolic meanings of different color combinations. He normally won't even let you touch it. You find the book in a hidden compartment in his room. Its cover is made of calfskin, already badly worn. You open the pages, and inside, written in beautiful script, are all manner of knowledge. For example, the book mentions that green was at the time a very unstable color, difficult to dye, and was therefore often associated with change, fate, and the fickleness of love. When Shakespeare later called jealousy a green-eyed monster in his works, it was likely related to this cultural symbolism. You find the page about purple. It reads that the dye for making the color of emperors required extraction from the glands of thousands upon thousands of sea snails, a process extremely complex and foul-smelling. Thus, purple represented not only supreme power, but because of the mysterious and bloody nature of its origins, was also considered by some to carry an ominous portent. Looking at the description of purple in the book, then at the torn robe in the master's hands, you feel an inexplicable chill. This is not merely a damaged garment. It is a dangerous signal, a concealed truth. And you, a lowly tailor's apprentice, have inadvertently glimpsed a corner of this storm. The atmosphere in the workshop grows even more oppressive. The sun outside climbs higher and higher, yet time seems to grow shorter and shorter. Now, you must not only rush make a new gown for the countess, but also repair, without anyone's knowledge, a king's robe that carries a kingdom's secret. Your head buzzes. What a full day this has been. Time slips quietly by amid the tense sewing work. Master Alphonse concentrates entirely on repairing the king's purple robe. His movements are gentle and precise, as though he's not mending fabric but soothing a wounded soul. You continue working with Thomas on Countess Katerina's red velvet gown. Edmund has been dispatched to handle a task that seems simple, yet is extremely important: matching buttons for the Countess's gown. In the Middle Ages, buttons were nothing like the plastic lumps we take for granted today. Before the 13th century, Europeans primarily used laces, pins, or brooches to fasten garments. The invention of the button was, one might say, a major revolution in the history of clothing. It allowed garments to be made more form-fitting, better able to accentuate the lines of the body, thereby giving rise to the popularity of fitted garments like the cote-hardie. But buttons quickly evolved from a practical tool into an ornament for flaunting wealth. Nobles began making buttons from gold, silver, ivory, gemstones, and other precious materials. It was not uncommon for a single garment to be adorned with dozens or even hundreds of buttons. King Francis I of France reportedly had a black velvet doublet studded with 13,600 gold buttons. Imagine wearing such a garment, jingling with every step. Practically a walking treasury. Edmund carefully selects from an ornate wooden box dedicated to storing buttons. Inside is a dazzling array, some set with pearls, others inlaid with rubies, still others carved from solid crystal. Each one is a miniature work of art. Master, Edmund asks, holding up 2 buttons and looking undecided. What do you think? For the Countess's gown, should we use this silver button carved with a rose, or this gold button set with turquoise? Without looking up, the master emits an impatient grunt from his throat. Use the silver ones. The Countess is only a countess. Turquoise is reserved for the level of a duchess. Do you want her family to be accused of overstepping their rank? Edmund's hand trembles so badly he nearly drops the gold button on the floor. Listening from the side, your heart pounds, so even a tiny button has such strict hierarchical divisions behind it. This is another part of the sumptuary laws. The law dictated not only what commoners couldn't wear, but also specified in detail which particular colors, fabrics, and ornaments nobles of different ranks were permitted to use. For instance, only the king and the highest-ranking members of the royal family could use sable fur as trimming. If you were a mere baron and used sable on your clothing, the consequences could be very serious: a fine at the least, and at worst it could be seen as a challenge to royal authority. This obsessive pursuit of detail reached almost fanatical proportions. It also led to a peculiar phenomenon: the rapid turnover of fashion. When a new style or decoration appeared, the upper nobility would adopt it first. Then the next tier of nobles would rush to imitate. To maintain their uniqueness, the upper nobility would then be forced to seek newer, more extravagant styles. This created a fashion arms race. Just then, hurried footsteps approach. Countess Katerina's personal maid bursts in, her face even whiter than Edmund's. Monsieur Alphonse, the maid says anxiously. The Countess insists on adding a row of diamond buttons to the cuffs. She says it's the latest fashion. The visiting prince's sister dresses exactly that way. The master stops his work and slowly raises his head. His gaze is like 2 icy owls. Diamonds? He asks coldly. Yes, she says she's already had her jewelry box brought over. The maid's voice grows smaller and smaller, preposterous. The master leaps to his feet. The needle and thread in his hand nearly snap. Has she lost her mind? At the king and queen's banquet, wearing ornaments more dazzling than the queen's? Does she want everyone to think her wealth exceeds that of the royal house? The air in the workshop drops to freezing. You understand why the master is so furious. In the court, dressing is an art of reading the room. You must always be aware of your place. You cannot outshine your superiors, especially not the king and queen. This is an unwritten rule, but one more deadly than any law. Dressing too ostentatiously could invite mortal danger. Countess Katerina's behavior, in the master's eyes, is undoubtedly a foolish provocation. Go back and tell your mistress, the master says in an unquestionable tone. Her gown will use silver buttons most befitting her station. If she has objections, she may come tell me herself, or she can take it up with the king's magistrate. The maid, cowed by the master's force of presence, doesn't dare say another word, and scurries away. The master sits back down and lets out a long breath. He looks at you three, standing there dumbfounded, and says slowly, "Remember, children, we are tailors. Our job is to make beautiful clothes, but more importantly, our job is to make eye-corrected clothes. A garment can make a person, and it can also destroy a person. Our duty is to ensure that our clients do not walk down the latter path because of what we've sewn." You nod thoughtfully. You had assumed a tailor's work dealt only with fabric and thread. Now, you realize that what you sew involves far more than silk and velvet. It's about power, rules, and the ways of the world. A tiny button can set in motion the complex machinery of court politics and the laws of survival. You look down at the red skirt hem in your hands and your grasp. It seems to have taken on a life and weight of its own. You know that at tonight's banquet, this gown will be the focus of countless eyes, and whether it can bring good fortune to its wearer depends, in part, on you, these humble tailors. The feeling is both terrifying and strangely thrilling. As noon approaches, the castle bell tower sounds its heavy chimes. This is the signal for lunch. Master Alphonse finally sets down his work on the king's robe. Under his skilled hands, the tear is already nearly invisible. He covers the robe again with a clean linen cloth, then gestures that you may take a brief rest. The three apprentices practically dash to the small kitchen behind the workshop, as if granted reprieve. Lunch is simple, just black bread, a chunk of hard, dry cheese, and a jug of thin ale. But for you, having starved all morning, this is practically a feast. The black bread is hard enough to use as a weapon. You have to soak it in ale to soften it before you can swallow it. This is the apprentice's rare moment of relaxation. Without the master watching over you, you can chat a little and exchange the various bits of court gossip you've heard. "Hey, did you hear?" Thomas says, chewing bread with an air of mystery. "That visiting prince from the neighboring kingdom, his shoes are absolutely insane." "What about them?" Edmund asks, curious. "His shoes are pointed, very, very pointed. They say the toe is 2 feet long." Thomas gestures with his hands. "When he walks, he has to tie the shoe tips to his knees with a gold chain, or he'd trip over himself." You and Edmund stare wide-eyed. A 2-foot-long shoe tip. What must that look like? This peculiar type of shoe was called the ikekau shoe, originating from Krakow, Poland, and wildly popular across Europe in the 14th and 15th centuries. The length of the toe became a tool of competition. Nobles' shoe points grew longer and longer, to the point of absurdity. King Edward III even had to issue a decree stipulating that shoe tips could not exceed 2 inches in length, but to little effect. People devised all manner of workarounds, such as stuffing the long toes with gold thread or moss, so they could maintain the length while being slightly easier to walk in. Absolutely mad. Edmund complains, "Dressed like that, how do you ride a horse? How do you fight? Who knows? Maybe they change shoes before going to battle?" Thomas shrugs. "But I've heard the church absolutely despises those shoes. They call them the devil's toes, a symbol of vanity and sin." The medieval church consistently took a critical stance toward fashion trends. They considered excessive attention to one's appearance a sign of moral corruption. Besides pointed shoes, they also fiercely attacked tights, low necklines, and all manner of lavish decoration. But clearly, the nobility paid these warnings no heed. While eating your barely palatable lunch, you enthusiastically exchange these fashion oddities and complaints. These bits of gossip are among the few pleasures of your tedious apprenticeship. From these scattered pieces of information, you gradually piece together a bizarre and fantastical medieval fashion world, a world filled with creativity, vanity, competition, and rigid hierarchy. Just then, Master Alphonse walks in. You immediately stop talking and bury your heads in battling the black bread. The master pours himself a cup of ale, looks at you, and suddenly speaks. Don't think those nobles have it so good. Many of them are actually drowning in debt. You all freeze, not understanding why the master has suddenly said this. Where do you think all that silk, velvet, gold thread, and jewelry comes from? The master takes a sip of ale and continues. Much of it is bought on credit. The fabric merchants, jewelers, and we tailors. We're all their creditors. Count might appear to be wearing clothes worth a fortune on the outside, but the income from his estate might not even cover the cost of his wife's winter fur cloak. This is a shocking truth. Many medieval nobles went deeply into debt to maintain their outward luxury and respectability. Expenditure on clothing and accessories was their single greatest expense. This phenomenon is historically known as the consumption crisis of the aristocracy. So, the master concludes, don't envy them. We may be poor, but we earn our living by our craft and sleep soundly. As for them, one day they might have creditors at the door, and even the fine clothes on their backs will be stripped away to settle debts. With that, he finishes his ale and walks out of the kitchen. You look at each other, speechless for a moment. The master's words are like a stone cast into the still lake of your hearts. You look at your own rough hands, covered in tiny needle-prick wounds and calluses. For the first time, you feel that being a tailor may not be as lowly as you once imagined. At least you are creators, and those nobles who wear your creations are very often merely prisoners enslaved by the tides of fashion. The brief lunch break is over. You return to your worktables and resume the afternoon's battle. Though the road ahead is long, there seems to be something new in your heart, something you can't quite name, perhaps pride, perhaps equanimity. The afternoon sun slants through the windows, forming columns of light in the dust-filled air. The workshop atmosphere is even more tense than it was in the morning, because the most difficult part is about to begin attaching the sleeves to Countess Katarina's gown. Medieval sleeves were not simply sewn onto a garment as they are today. They were often made separately and could be interchanged. A noblewoman might own one base dress but have several pairs of sleeves in different colors and styles to be worn according to the occasion. The decoration on sleeves was also extravagantly lavish: embroidery, pearls, tassels, everything imaginable. Sometimes a single pair of sleeves was worth more than the dress itself. Thomas is in charge of the embroidery, Edmund handles the sewing, and you are sent by the master to deal with another customer, a knight named William. This knight William is a member of the King's Guard, renowned for his fiery temper and fierce bravery in battle. He's had a pair of trousers custom made, and he's coming for a fitting this afternoon. The master clearly doesn't want to deal with this difficult customer himself, so he's passed the fine assignment to you. Holding the freshly sewn trousers, your heart is pounding. They are a typical pair of medieval men's tights called ejechasses. They actually consist of two separate leg pieces, tied by laces to the undergarment at the waist. The material is wool, and to accentuate the muscular lines of the legs, they're made very, very tight. You've barely set up the fitting room when Knight William strides in. He's tall and powerfully built, with a long scar on his face that makes him look even more formidable. He takes off his trousers, revealing a linen pair of extremely short drawers underneath the standard men's undergarment of the time. Then, he begins the laborious process of pulling on the tights you've handed him. It's an extremely difficult endeavor. The trousers are as tight as a second skin. He has to use every ounce of strength to force his legs in. His face turns crimson, and he curses non-stop. Damn it! Are these meant for a human being? He yanks furiously while bellowing at you. Can't you make them a bit looser? You shrink back, stammering a quiet explanation. Sir, this is the most fashionable style right now. If they were made looser, they wouldn't show off your impressive leg muscles. The popularity of these tights had another rather embarrassing reason. As doublets grew shorter and shorter, trousers had to be made higher and tighter to cover the undergarments and waist laces. Fashion sometimes simply defies all reason, Knight William finally gets both leg pieces on. Then he bends over, trying to tie the laces at the tops of the leg pieces to his undergarment's waistband. At that moment, there comes a crisp the sound of fabric tearing from behind him. Your heart drops. This is bad. Knight William freezes. He slowly turns around, fixing you with a murderous gaze. What happened? He squeezes out through clenched teeth. Trembling, you circle around to his back, and there it is. A small split at the crotch of the trousers. This was actually a common problem with chassis, these separate-legged trousers. To solve this issue, tailors later invented a triangular or diamond-shaped piece of fabric to connect the two leg pieces and cover the crotch area. This piece was called a code piece. Initially, it was just a practical patch, but like pointed shoes, it too embarked on a mad arms race. Men began stuffing it with cotton and fabric, making it bigger and more prominent to flaunt their masculinity. By the 16th century, some cod pieces had grown so large they could serve as pockets, holding coins or small snacks. But for now, Knight William's trousers don't have one, making the split particularly awkward. I'll repair it immediately, sir, you stammer, cold sweat running down your forehead. Repair? Knight William's volume spikes. I have to wear these to the banquet tonight, and you're telling me repair? Your legs go weak. You know that if this isn't handled well, this volatile knight really might draw his sword. Your mind races, and you suddenly remember something the master often says. When skill can't solve the problem, use words. You take a deep breath and summon your courage. Sir, please calm your anger. This isn't a quality issue, it's actually the latest design. I've heard that in the French court, the bravest knights intentionally leave a small opening like this on their trousers. They say it symbolizes fearlessness and vigorous vitality. Only cowards wrap themselves up completely. You're making this up entirely. But the words seem to strike Knight William's vanity. He pauses, eyeing you suspiciously. Truly, absolutely true? Sir, you make every effort to look sincere. Think about it. A knight of your distinguished battle record, wearing a pair of perfectly flawless trousers. What would people think? They'd think you care too much about your appearance. But a small rebellious detail like this actually highlights your masculinity. It shows you're a man who's truly been on the battlefield unconcerned with trivialities. To add persuasiveness, you throw in one more line. Of course, if you insist, I can sew it up. But you might end up looking like those court officials who fuss over nothing but button styles. This last remark clearly does the trick. Knight William despises those powerless officials more than anything. He hesitates for a moment, then puffs out his chest and declares, "Don't bother sewing it. Leave it as it is. I want those Frenchmen to see that we English knights have more spirit than they do." He swaggers out as he speaks, seemingly quite proud of the rip in his trousers. You lean against the wall, letting out a long, long breath. You feel as though you've just returned from a battlefield. Wiping the sweat from your brow, you're filled with a survivor's clarity. You've discovered that being a tailor requires not only good craftsmanship, but also a good tongue and perhaps even a bit of improvisational deception. Whether medieval tailors truly used such smooth talk to cover their mistakes isn't clearly documented in historical records. But from literary works and court records, we can see that disputes between craftsmen and customers occurred regularly. How tailors defended themselves and maintained their reputations is itself a fascinating historical topic. Some historians speculate that a successful court tailor must have been an excellent communicator and psychologist. Others argue that in such a rigidly hierarchical era, the quality of one's craft was the only thing that truly mattered. You return to the workroom to find the master watching you with a knowing look. Clearly, he heard everything. He says nothing, just pats you on the shoulder and hands you a spool of blue silk thread, gesturing for you to continue working. But you know that today you've officially proven yourself. You've learned a lesson more important than showing how to use wit and words to mend tears that needle and thread cannot fix. The crisis is temporarily averted, and you throw yourself back into the intense work. Your task is to sew a ring of blue piping around the cuffs of Countess Katerina's gown. This deep blue is called royal blue, a very expensive and popular color. Beside your work table sit several large ceramic jars filled with dyes of various colors. A pungent chemical smell permeates the air. This is the smell of dye. Medieval dyeing was a complex and mysterious craft, more akin to alchemy. Dyers possessed all manner of secret recipes for extracting pigments from plants, insects, and even minerals. These formulas were typically family secrets, closely guarded. But beauty often comes hand in hand with danger. Many dyes were themselves toxic. For instance, a mineral called horpimentin could produce a brilliant yellow, but it is in fact a compound of arsenic lethally poisonous. There was also a very popular green called Gisquel's green, invented in the late 18th century, which likewise contained arsenic. Wearing clothes dyed with such substances could cause skin ulceration. Long-term exposure could even lead to death. After Napoleon died on the island of St. Helena, high concentrations of arsenic were detected in samples of his hair. A widely circulated theory holds that the green wallpaper in his bedroom was printed with this arsenic-containing dye, which released toxic gas in the humid environment. You look at the multicolored threads before you and suddenly find them no longer quite so beautiful. Instead, they carry a hint of the uncanny. As a tailor, you handle fabrics and threads that may contain toxic substances every day. It amounts to a kind of slow poisoning, but you have no choice. Master Alphonse seems to read your thoughts. He comes over, picks up a roll of bright green silk, and says, "Do you know where this green comes from?" You shake your head. First, you lay a base of blue using woad, then overdye it with yellow from weld. He continues, "Green is one of the hardest colors to dye because it requires the combination of two different dyes, and it's very unstable. It fades easily. That's why in medieval art and literature, green often represents fickleness and unreliability. You've seen those paintings where the devil and dragons are depicted? Many of them are green. Today we think of green as representing life, nature, and peace. But in the Middle Ages, its symbolic meaning was far more complex, even carrying negative connotation. This was largely determined by the limitations of dyeing technology at the time. However, the master shifts tone precisely because it was so difficult to achieve a vivid, pure, lasting green. It paradoxically became a symbol of the highest nobility and greatest wealth. Isn't that ironic? You nod in agreement. Humanity's pursuit of rarity seems to be etched in our very bones. The harder something is to obtain, the more precious it becomes. The afternoon hours fly by in tense, orderly work. Countess Katerina's red gown has taken definitive shape. The master has also finally completed the flawless repair of the tear in the king's purple robe. Now he's using a warm block of iron, separated from the fabric by a thin layer of damp cloth, carefully pressing the repaired area to restore the fabric's smoothness. Medieval irons were not electric. They were typically solid blocks of iron, or hollow containers that could be filled with hot coals, heated in the fireplace before use. Controlling the temperature was entirely a matter of experience. One slip, and you could leave a permanent scorch mark on expensive fabric. Just then, a court page arrives with a message. The princess requires new measurements taken for new garments to be prepared for the upcoming spring festival. The master is at a critical juncture and can't step away. He glances at you and says, "You go, take the measuring tape and chalk. Record the measurements. Remember, don't say what shouldn't be said. And don't look at what shouldn't be seen." Your heart leaps into your throat again, taking the princess's measurements. This is the king's most beloved daughter, a young lady renowned for her beauty and willfulness. This is far more nerve-wracking than dealing with that volatile knight. You pick up a small leather case containing measurement tools and follow the page through long corridors to the wing of the palace where the princess resides. The decor here is noticeably more luxurious and feminine than the rest of the castle. The walls are hung with tapestries depicting love stories. The air carries a sweet floral fragrance. You are led into a spacious sitting room. The princess sits before an enormous stained glass window. Two of her attendants are combing her golden hair. She sees you and only lazily lifts one eyelid, signaling you to begin. You kneel on the floor, open your tool case, and take out a soft measuring tape made of linen with markings drawn in ink. You dare not look the princess in the eye. You can only keep your head lowered and begin measuring from her ankles, as protocol dictates. Ankle, 7 inches, calf length, 15 inches. You measure while recording the data with a small charcoal pencil on a wax tablet, a reusable notepad. You write with an iron stylus, and the flat end of the stylus can smooth the wax to erase the writing. The princess seems impatient, chatting and laughing ceaselessly with her attendants in a dialect mixed with French that you can barely understand. You try to ignore their conversation and focus on your work. When you reach the waist measurement, you need the princess to stand and spread her arms. You carefully loop the measuring tape around her slender waist and record the number. Just as you're about to proceed to the next measurement, you inadvertently overhear the princess whisper something to her closest attendant. The words strike you like a bolt of lightning, she says. Tell Ferdinand the plan proceeds as before. At the jousting tournament during the spring festival, she will receive the token she desires. Ferdinand, that's the name of the visiting prince. A token? What token? At the jousting tournament? Your hand trembles, nearly dropping the wax tablet. You immediately realize you've stumbled upon an enormous secret. This sounds nothing like ordinary court small talk. It sounds far more like a conspiracy. The princess and the visiting prince apparently share some kind of secret arrangement. You immediately lower your head, pretending you've heard nothing, and continue measuring her arm length and shoulder width. Your heart pounds wildly inside your chest. You can even hear the rush of blood in your ears. In the court, the most dangerous thing is knowing a royal family member's secret, especially one that might involve a clandestine romance or even political intrigue. You know that if the princess discovers you overheard her conversation, you might not survive the night. You force yourself to calm down and complete all measurements as quickly as possible. Then you pack up your tools, bow to the princess, and prepare to withdraw. Wait, the princess suddenly calls you back. Every hair on your body stands on end. You freeze where you are, not daring to turn around. How is your craftsmanship? She asks, her voice betraying neither pleasure nor anger. Your Highness, I am still learning, you stammer. Is that so? She gives a light laugh. I've heard that Alphonse is the finest tailor in the kingdom. As his apprentice, you can't be too bad either. She pauses, then says, I have a small item I need you to take care of. Come with me. Your mind goes blank. You can only follow her like a puppet into her bedchamber. The princess takes a handkerchief from a jewelry box. It is an extremely fine linen handkerchief, embroidered with an iris flower in silver thread, the emblem of her mother's family. See this loose thread? She points to the tip of one of the iris petals, where there's an almost invisible broken thread. I don't like it. I want you to embroider a small star here, in gold thread. You take the handkerchief and examine it closely. It's very delicate work, but not difficult. What's strange is, why does she want a gold star embroidered? A star is not part of her royal family's heraldry. Then it hits you. The visiting prince, Ferdinand, his family's coat of arms features a golden star. You understand instantly. This handkerchief is the token the princess mentioned. She intends to present this modified handkerchief, now bearing the other family's emblem, as a token to Prince Ferdinand at the jousting tournament. In the Middle Ages, this was a very clear signal of love, even of betrothal. This is an extremely dangerous matter. If the king found out, he would be furious. This isn't merely his daughter's private romance, it could affect the diplomatic relations between two kingdoms. You hold this feather-light handkerchief, yet it feels as though it weighs 1,000 pounds. You are now not only an audience to the secret, but about to become a participant and accomplice. Can you do it? The princess looks at you, her gaze carrying both inquiry and warning. You know you have no room to refuse, as you command, Your Highness. You lower your head respectfully, you take the handkerchief and exit the princess's chamber, your back completely drenched in cold sweat. Walking back, your steps feel unsteady, as if treading on clouds. Your mind is in chaos: the princess's secret, the prince's coat of arms, the torn king's robe. These seemingly unrelated threads interweave in your mind into a complex and dangerous web. You don't know where this web will lead you. You only know that your fate a mere tailor's apprentice has, without your knowing, become inextricably bound to the fate of the entire kingdom. By the time you return to the workshop, dazed and clutching the princess's handkerchief, the sky has already begun to darken. The master and the other two apprentices have lit every tallow candle and oil lamp in the workshop. Candlelight flickers, stretching the shadows on the walls thin and long, like silent sentinels. Countess Katerina's red gown is essentially complete. Thomas and Edmund are performing the final touches, sewing a row of tiny, closely spaced pearls along the hem of the skirt. This is a task that tests eyesight and patience to the extreme. They must work by candlelight, firmly securing each tiny pearl onto the velvet. You hand the princess's measurement data to the master, then silently retreat to your own corner and take out the handkerchief the princess entrusted to you. You don't tell the master about it. Instinct tells you. The fewer people who know about this, the better. From a small box reserved for precious threads, you find a spool of the finest gold thread. This kind of gold thread is truly made from gold drawn into wire, then wound around a silk cord, delicate yet strong, glittering captivatingly in the candlelight. You turn up the nearest oil lamp to its brightest setting, and then you begin to work. First, you must carefully remove the broken silver thread. Then embroider a small 5-pointed star shape in gold thread in its place. This proves far more difficult than you imagined. The handkerchief's linen weave is extremely fine, and the gold thread is stiffer than ordinary silk thread. Each stitch requires precise control of force. The light is dim, and your eyes quickly begin to ache. The candlelight dances constantly, making the tiny embroidery point seem to shift near and far. Beside you, Thomas is doing similar embroidery work, though his task is to embroider intricate vine patterns onto a pair of sleeves. Medieval embroidery had already reached a very high level of artistry. England, in particular, was famous throughout the world for its exquisite opus Anglicanum, English work. This technique used couched gold thread and raised embroidery to create patterns with remarkable three-dimensionality and light and shadow effects, finished pieces rivaling oil paintings. Many bishops' vestments and altar cloths were made using this technique and are now treasured holdings of major museums.